she loves the snow. Yes, she loves it. Jesus, look at the size of that fucker. Damn. Alright, we got her in the garage. I'm gonna take the tires off and lift her up. Ah, the lift arm won't fit under the car with this flat tire. Damn it. I just fucking tore up the compressor hose here. It looks all nice. Now I gotta fucking unwind it, fill up the goddamn tire. Fucking A, this isn't starting out very good. So here you can see the actual kit. It comes with a nice set of instructions, and they are basically extensions that you bolt on to the bottom of the shock, or the strut, to lift up the car. So these are the front. This is for the front, I think. Alright, so here's a quick rundown on the tools you're going to need to do this job. I've got a 21mm wrench and socket, 19mm wrench and socket, 17mm wrench and socket, 14mm wrench and socket. You're going to need some ratchets, a hammer. You're definitely going to need that. Screwdriver, flathead screwdriver might come in handy, and preferably needle nose pliers if you have them, for removing your cotter pins on the lower ball joints in the front. And actually, if you have a pickling fork, I don't know where I set mine, to pop the lower ball joints out in the front, that will definitely come in handy. And I didn't really need any extensions for the sockets, anything like that. Pretty straightforward, but you definitely do need more tools than it is listed in the instructions. That says you just need a 17mm and 14mm wrench and socket, but have some other stuff on hand in case you need it. Tire iron for taking your wheels off. You're going to need a car lift or jack stands, at least 2 jack stands to do this, or a couple floor jacks, as you cannot do this using ramps. So that's what you'll need. Get it together. It's not too hard of a job. It took me, I spread it out over 2 days, a few hours each evening. I stripped everything down, and then the next day I installed the lift components. And out of a 10, I'd say this is probably a 3 or a 4 difficulty. I got frustrated a little bit, but that was mainly just with stuck bolts. Definitely want some PB blaster and soak those fuckers the night before. And also a very good thing to have, if you don't have an impact wrench or a breaker bar, have some sort of a pipe or a box tubing that you can use as a cheater bar. Because a lot of these suspension components are they're torqued pretty tight, and they're a pain in the butt to get loose. So this thing ended up being my good friend throughout this install. Definitely came in handy quite a few times, but not too big of a tool list needed here. Installing this kit is going to change your alignment quite a bit. Flyin Miata recommends marking your alignment shims with a paint marker, just so you can get everything back in the same general position as it was before. So these are on the lower control arms on all 4 corners. Okay, so just to reiterate which bolts you want to loosen in the front, these 2 lower control arm bolts, and then this long one that goes across, that's the upper control arm. And in the rear, you're going to want to loosen up this one, and then both of these on the lower control arm, and then both spots up there on the upper control arm. And then that way it'll be able to swing around and move a bit. The next step is to disconnect the sway bars in the front and rear. And since you won't be able to reconnect your sway bars unless you had some longer sway bar end links, I am just going to take my end links out and leave the sway bar there. In the rear here, I've just undone these 4 14mm bolts that hold the sway bar in. I'm just going to remove it entirely so that it's not dangling there, and I won't have to worry about any of that. Front sway bar is quite a lot harder to take out just because you have all this stuff through there. So I just disconnected it from the control arms and flipped it up underneath the bumper here and secured it in a few spots with some zip ties, so that'll be as nice and sturdy. It'll stay there until I reconnect it when I take the lift kit out. I'm at the rear of the car here, and I'm gonna loosen this 17mm bolt that holds the bottom of the strut to the control arm. So I'm putting the first one on the left side of the rear. You can see they have these little cutouts with an L and an R, and when you have the one on the right side, only one of those will be legible. So I can see here the L is legible. So this one, you see this hole in it here lines up with that hole that's already in the control arm. This drops in there, and then your old shock bolt will go through there, and then the strut will bolt onto that new part right there. So you can kind of just finagle it in there. And you can see when you're going to reconnect the strut to it, it's definitely going to lift it. So next step, put the strut bolt back through, and that one nut and bolt that came with it, and the other is for bolting on the strut. Okay, I'm still on the rear here. I basically concluded there's no way I'm going to get this up to there to put the bolt through without somehow compressing the spring. So instead, I'm going to unbolt the upper control arm. All right, so with the upper control arm unbolted, there's way more room. So that'll just slide right in there. I can finagle that into there, no problem. And then I'll lower the car down on some blocks or low enough to use a floor jack and jack it up down here to get that bolt back in there. Shouldn't be too hard. So you can see here, I've lowered the car down and I'm jacking up the lower control arm with a floor jack. And you can see you can easily just press that in there and get that bolt through there and have her all buttoned up. So I am done in the rear for now. I've got everything tightened back up, all the hardware on the mounts tightened up. I put my alignment shims back in their respective places and tighten these down. I have not torqued these yet. I'm going to wait and torque the lower control arm bolts and the upper control arm bolts when I have weight on the suspension. So I'm going to lower the car down and I'll torque those when it's sitting on the tires. Okay, up on the front, what we're going to do is remove the lower shock mounting bolt there. And we are going to remove this cotter pin and this castle nut that attaches the ball joint to the knuckle here. Okay, so I finally got the lower control arm, the ball joint to pop out of the knuckle. I ended up not doing the top like I was going to try. And I found out if you want to use the pickle fork there to pop the ball joint out, it's best if you have your strut still bolted in place. That made it a lot easier to get them out. So I'm going to move ahead and put the front brackets in and bolt them to the lower control arm. Okay, with the control arms down, we've got now have access to this bolt here. We're going to remove this bolt that goes vertically through the control arm, and it's one of the bolts for the ball joint. So take that out. Right, we can slide the first bracket into the control arm now. They both look similar. You'll see one side of it has this thick spacer plate on it. You're going to want that facing the rear of your car. So put this ball joint back in and the strut bolt back in there and attach it to the control arm. Lower the car down towards the ground and use a floor jack to lift up the lower control arm to insert the strut bolt here and to get the ball joint back in place. Thing back together. I've got my sway bar tucked up out of the way. Everything is tight here. It's not torqued yet. I'm going to torque it with weight on the suspension. I have all my alignment shims put back in their respective places. And so I'm just going to double check everything and put the wheels on it and see how funny it looks with a 3-inch lift.
Now that I got everything put back in place, I am using this engine transmission jack to put weight on the suspension on this side so that I can torque the lower control arm bolts as well as the upper control arm bolt. You want to make sure you have weight on the suspension when you torque those so you don't preload the suspension.
Put either of my Miatas on this lift here. I have to drive them onto blocks in order to get the lift arms under the car. And here I am getting them ready to put under the tires to take it down. And then I remembered, shit, I just fucking lifted the car. I don't need these. So I just walked outside the garage to this. Some fresh snow. It was not snowing when I walked in here about an hour ago.
Lulu, come here, Lulu. Come on, sweetie. Look up there. Up, up.
Thing is straight ripping through the snow. This is fucking awesome.
What do you think, Lil? Pretty sweet?
No, unenthused. Alrighty, so this is how I lifted my Miata. I got the kit from Flyin Miata. It was about 180 bucks. Comes powder coated. You can also get it from Paco Motorsports, who developed it. For a little bit less, I think, in a raw finish. Lulu, come here. Come here, Lulu. Lulu, come in. I've got some other plans for the Miata, so stay tuned. I've got some studded snows and the black steel rims I'm going to put on. I might do like a little bash bar up front, some fog lights, something like that. And this is actually a re-up of a video I previously uploaded, but I had made a mistake and I did not remove the vertical ball joint bolt on the lower control arm in the front that bolts through the bracket, and a viewer pointed that out to me, so thank you very much to YouTube user John Becker. You're a lifesaver. And I'm hoping to get the car out on the ice at some point. We've got ice races here in Maine, so stay tuned if you want to see more of this car, and I hope to see you next time.